His eyes scanned my face with that same intensity from before. "How have you been? Any problems?" "No problems. Actually, it's been the quietest few days I've had in months." I set the menu down even though he wasn't looking at it. "Thank you for that. I told you it was handled." He leaned back, completely relaxed in a way that suggested he was comfortable everywhere. "Have you heard from Tyler at all?" "Nothing. Not a single text or call. It's like he vanished completely." "Good. That means the message was received clearly." Anthony's gaze drifted to the other tables, the couples dining, the businessmen conducting deals over expensive wine. "What time does your shift end?" The question caught me off guard. 11. We close at 10:30, but cleanup takes about half an hour. "Why?" "Because I'd like to take you to dinner. Somewhere other than where you work, where you can actually sit down and eat instead of serving everyone else." He said it casually, but there was intention underneath. "If you're interested." I should have said no. Should have remembered Franco's warning about transactions and debts, and getting pulled into worlds I didn't understand. But standing there looking at Anthony, at the man who had ended 4 months of terror with 7 minutes of controlled violence, I found myself nodding. "I'd like that." "Good. I'll wait." He pulled out his phone, already moving on to whatever business required his attention. "Take your time finishing work. I'm patient when it matters." The next 2 hours passed in a strange state of heightened awareness. I was conscious of Anthony's presence the entire time, even when I was on the opposite side of the restaurant. I caught him watching me periodically, not constantly, just occasional glances that felt weighted. At 10:45, I finished my last table, split my tips with the other servers, and changed out of my work shirt into the clean blouse I kept in my locker for exactly these situations. Anthony was waiting by the front entrance, settled in a chair like he owned it. He probably did own it, along with everything else in the building. When I approached, he stood with fluid grace and held the door open. "There's a French place 3 blocks from here," he said as we stepped into the cool night air. "Small, quiet, excellent food. The owner is a friend. He'll treat us well." "Another person who owes you favors?" Anthony glanced at me, something that might have been amusement crossing his features. "Actually, no. Pierre is just someone I've known since we were teenagers. Sometimes people are friends without obligation attached." We walked in comfortable silence. The streets were quieter at this hour, most businesses closed. Just the occasional car passing and other late-night workers heading home. Anthony walked on the street side of the sidewalk, an old-fashioned gesture that reminded me this man had been raised with certain codes, even if those codes existed alongside violence. The restaurant he led me to was exactly as promised. Small, maybe 12 tables, warm lighting that made everything feel intimate. The owner, a barrel-chested man with a magnificent mustache, greeted Anthony with genuine warmth and rapid French that I couldn't follow. We were seated at a corner table away from the few other diners, menus appearing instantly along with water and bread. "Order whatever you want," Anthony said, finally opening his menu. "Pierre's coq au vin is exceptional, but everything here is worth trying. This is too much." I looked at the prices, each dish more expensive than my usual grocery budget for an entire week. "I can't let you pay for this. You're not letting me do anything. I invited you." "That means I'm paying. If it makes you feel better, consider it an apology for the dramatic way I handled Tyler. You have nothing to apologize for. You did exactly what needed to be done." I studied the menu, trying to focus on food instead of the surreal situation. "The salmon looks good." We ordered, and once the waiter left, Anthony turned his full attention to me. "Tell me about architecture. You said you studied for 2 years. What made you interested in that field?" The question opened something in me that had been closed for a while. I found myself talking about discovering architecture through a school project in middle school, about realizing that spaces could be designed to make people feel certain ways, about wanting to create homes that families would build memories inside instead of just structures that held furniture. Anthony listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was actually paying attention. "Why did you have to stop?" The story came out easier this time. My parents' divorce, my father disappearing from our lives, working multiple jobs while trying to study, my mother's medical bills eating through any savings we managed to accumulate. By the time I finished, our food had arrived, and I was surprised to realize I had been talking for almost 20 minutes. What about financial aid? Anthony asked, cutting into his steak with precise movements. Student loans? Scholarships? Grants? I already have loans from the first 2 years. Adding more debt when I'm not even sure I could finish the degree seems irresponsible. I tasted the salmon, which was indeed exceptional. And scholarships usually go to students fresh out of high school, not 27-year-olds who dropped out years ago. There are other options. Adult continuing education programs, work-study arrangements, people who invest in promising talent. He said it carefully, like he was testing the waters. I appreciate the thought, but I need to do this myself if I do it at all. Taking handouts or owing favors doesn't feel right. Instead of arguing, Anthony nodded. Pride is important. Self-reliance matters. But refusing help when it's genuinely offered isn't strength. Sometimes it's just stubbornness. Maybe. I took another bite, considering. What about you? Did you always plan to go into the family business? His expression shifted, became more guarded. I didn't have much choice. My father expected his sons to follow him. My older brother Michael died when I was 18. Car accident. Though there were rumors it wasn't really an accident. After that, I was the heir. The responsibility fell to me whether I wanted it or not. Did you want it? I wanted Sophia to be safe. I wanted my mother to stop crying herself to sleep. I wanted the people who might have killed Michael to fear our family enough that they wouldn't try again. He met my eyes directly. So I learned what I needed to learn. Became what I needed to become. And now here I am, 34 years old, running an empire built on violence and money and loyalty bought through fear. The honesty in his voice struck me. You say that like you regret it. I regret that Sophia died anyway. That all the power I accumulated couldn't save her from one angry man with quick hands. He finished his wine, refilled both our glasses from the bottle. But I don't regret protecting the people I can protect. Making sure others don't suffer what my family suffered. That has to count for something. We talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easier than it should have between a waitress and a crime boss. Anthony told me about growing up in the Italian neighborhood, about his grandmother who taught him to cook, about learning early that the world was divided between people who took what they wanted and people who let things be taken from them. I shared more about my dreams of designing houses, about the notebooks full of sketches I still kept, about feeling stuck in a life that wasn't quite what I had planned, but also wasn't entirely terrible. When we finally left the restaurant, Anthony walked me home again. That same protective positioning on the street side of the sidewalk. We stopped in front of my building, the flickering streetlight casting uneven shadows across the cracked pavement. I'd like to see you again, Anthony said, hands in his pockets, completely at ease. Not just when I visit Rossi's, actually take you out properly. If you're interested. I knew I should say no. Knew that getting involved with Anthony Valentasi was walking into complications I couldn't begin to predict. But I also knew that he was the first person in years who had listened to my dreams without dismissing them, who had treated me like someone worth protecting instead of someone to be controlled. I'm interested, I said, and watched something warm cross his features. Good. I'll call you. He waited while I unlocked the building door. Didn't leave until I was safely inside. Through the glass I could see him standing there, hands still in his pockets, watching to make sure I made it up the stairs. My phone buzzed before I even reached my apartment. Anthony's text was simple. Thank you for tonight. Sleep well. I saved his number under his full name, stared at it for a long moment, and wondered what exactly I was getting myself into. Whatever it was, I realized I wanted to find out. 2 weeks slipped by faster than I expected. Anthony called the day after our French dinner, asking if I was free Thursday, then Saturday, then the following Tuesday. Each time we met felt like peeling back another layer of who he really was beneath the tailored suits and controlled violence. Thursday, he took me to an art gallery opening in the financial district. I felt out of place immediately, surrounded by people in designer clothes discussing pieces that cost more than my annual salary. But Anthony stayed close, his hand occasionally finding the small of my back as he introduced me simply as Megan, never explaining who I was or why I mattered. The gallery owner treated him with the same careful respect Franco showed. That mixture of genuine warmth and underlying awareness, that this was someone you didn't cross. We stood in front of an abstract painting, all violent reds and blacks. When his phone rang, Anthony glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Excuse me for a moment." He stepped away to take the call, and I watched his entire demeanor change. The relaxed man who had been explaining his surprisingly deep knowledge of modern art disappeared, replaced by someone colder, sharper. His voice dropped too low for me to hear words, but the tone carried across the gallery floor. Command. Authority. The kind of voice that expected immediate obedience. When he returned 2 minutes later, the warmth came back like he was putting on a familiar mask. "Sorry about that. Work issue." "What kind of work requires that tone of voice?" I asked quietly. "The kind where people's lives depend on following instructions exactly." He said it without apology or explanation, just flat honesty. "Do you want to leave? We can get coffee somewhere quieter." We ended up in a small cafe 3 blocks away, tucked into a booth at the back where Anthony could see the entrance and exits. I was starting to notice that pattern. He never sat with his back to doors, always positioned himself where he could observe everyone coming and going. Always kept his phone face up on the table, checking it with a frequency that suggested constant monitoring of situations I couldn't see. "Does it ever stop?" I asked, watching him glance at his phone for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. "Being vigilant?" "Not really." He pocketed the device, giving me his full attention. "Survival in my world means staying 3 steps ahead of everyone who wants what you have or wants you gone. You relax, you die. Or worse, people you care about die. That sounds exhausting." It is. For a moment, something weary crossed his face, making him look older than 34. "But it's also all I know. I've been doing this since I was 18. Vigilance becomes habit. Habit becomes reflex. Eventually, you can't turn it off even when you want to." Saturday's date was dinner at an Italian restaurant on the waterfront. Anthony knew the owner, an elderly woman named Rosa, who kissed both his cheeks and called him Piccolo, despite him being at least a foot taller than her. She seated us at a private table on the patio overlooking the harbor, where boat lights reflected off black water, and the sound of waves provided background music. Halfway through our meal, I noticed the man at the bar. He had been watching our table for the past 10 minutes, his attention too focused to be casual interest. When he started to stand, moving in our direction, I felt my stomach clench with old fear. But before I could say anything, Anthony's hand moved to rest on the table, visible and relaxed, while his eyes tracked the approaching man with predatory awareness. The man stopped 3 feet from our table, hands carefully visible and empty. "Mr. Valentasi. Apologies for the interruption. Mr. Caruso wanted me to pass along his regards and confirm the Thursday meeting is still scheduled. Tell Caruso it's confirmed. 2 o'clock, usual location. And tell him next time he can call, instead of sending people to my dinner." Anthony's voice stayed pleasant, but the warning underneath was unmistakable. "Understood. Understood. My apologies again." The man retreated quickly, disappearing into the restaurant interior. I waited until he was gone before asking, "Does that happen often?" "More than I'd like. Less than it used to." Anthony returned his attention to his food, like the interruption was completely normal. "People in my business prefer face-to-face communication for sensitive matters. Phones can be tapped. Messages can be intercepted. A person showing up where you are is harder to fake. And you weren't worried he might be a threat?" I noticed him when we sat down, watched him for the past 15 minutes. He moved like someone carrying a message, not a weapon. And besides, he gestured subtly toward the parking lot. "I have 2 men positioned with sightlines to this table. If he had tried anything, they would have handled it before he got close." I looked where he indicated and saw a black SUV parked with clear view of the patio. Inside, barely visible, was the shape of someone watching. "You brought bodyguards to dinner." "I bring bodyguards everywhere. You just don't usually see them because they're good at staying invisible." He said it matter-of-factly, like this was completely normal dating behavior. "Does that bother you?" Invisible didn't mean imaginary. He had a rotation. Different drivers, different cars, the same rules. They never walked me to the door, never hovered in the hallway, never made me explain myself to my own life. Presence without pressure, I could live with that. It should have. Normal people didn't need armed guards for dinner dates. Normal people didn't have associates interrupting romantic evenings with business communications. But I was starting to realize that my definition of normal had been permanently altered the moment Anthony dragged Tyler into that alley. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. Ask me again in a few weeks. Tuesday, he picked me up after my shift at Rossi's, this time suggesting we just drive. No destination, no plan, just moving through the city while we talked. He asked about my mother, about what had caused her medical crisis that derailed my education. I told him about the emergency surgery, the complications that required extended hospital stays, the insurance company fighting every claim. She's better now, I explained, watching streetlights blur past the window. Lives in Arizona with her sister. The dry climate is easier on her lungs. We talk maybe once a month, mostly about nothing important. Our relationship never quite recovered after Dad left. I think she blamed me somehow. Like if I had been different, he would have stayed. That's not how that works. Anthony took a turn without signaling. That aggressive confidence that suggested traffic laws were suggestions. Parents who leave aren't running from their children. They're running from responsibility, from the work it takes to be decent human beings. Your father leaving says everything about him, and nothing about you. The certainty in his voice made my throat tight. You sound like you speak from experience. My father was many things. Loving wasn't one of them. Anthony's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He built an empire, but he destroyed his family doing it. My mother died when I was 23. The doctors said it was heart failure. I think it was heartbreak. 30 years married to a man who treated her like property, like another asset to be managed. Michael's death broke her. My father barely acknowledged her grief. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm telling you this so you understand something important. He pulled over into an empty parking lot overlooking the water, putting the car in park and turning to face me fully. My world is violent and complicated and morally questionable at best. The people in it don't operate by normal rules. They hurt each other, use each other, dispose of each other when convenient. That's what I grew up watching. That's what I became part of. But I'm telling you right now, if you decide this is something you want, something real between us, I won't treat you that way. I won't use you, or discard you, or make you feel like you're convenient until you're not. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Why are you telling me this now? Because I like you, Megan. More than I've liked anyone in years. And before this goes any further, you need to understand what being with me means. He reached across the console, taking my hand in his. It means people will watch you to get to me. It means rivals might try to use you as leverage. It means there will be nights I come home with blood on my clothes, and you can't ask whose blood it is. It means living with secrets and dangers that most people never have to think about. You're trying to scare me away. I'm trying to be honest with you. Because if we do this, really do this, I need you to choose it with full knowledge of what you're choosing. His thumb traced circles on my palm, the gesture almost absent-minded. I can protect you from a lot of things. I can make sure Tyler never bothers you again. I can keep rivals from touching you. I can provide security and resources and power, but I can't protect you from the reality of who I am and what I do. That's something you have to accept or walk away from. I sat with that for a long moment, watching boats move across the distant water, their lights creating trails of gold on black waves. Everything he said was true. Everything he offered came with costs I couldn't fully calculate yet, but I also knew that in the 2 weeks since Tyler disappeared, I had felt more alive than I had in years, more seen, more valued. What if I want to keep seeing where this goes? I asked quietly. What if I'm not ready to walk away yet? Something in Anthony's expression gentled, became vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. Then, I'll do everything in my power to make sure you don't regret that choice. He leaned across the console slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted. But I didn't want to. His lips met mine carefully, testing, asking permission even as he took it. The kiss started gentle, almost hesitant, before deepening into something that made my breath catch and my hands find his shoulders, pulling him closer, despite the awkward angle and the gear shift between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Anthony rested his forehead against mine. I've been wanting to do that since the moment you smiled at me in that French restaurant. Why didn't you? Because I needed you to understand first. Needed you to have all the information before I complicated things further. His hand came up to cup my cheek, thumb brushing across my lower lip. This isn't casual for me, Megan. I don't do casual. If we keep going down this path, I'm going to want all of you. Your time, your attention, your trust. That's how I'm built. All or nothing. That should scare me more than it does. I leaned into his touch, feeling the calluses on his palm that suggested his hands did more than sign documents and make phone calls. What if I'm not ready for all or nothing? What if I need time to figure this out? Then we take time. I'm patient when it matters. He kissed me again, softer this time, a promise rather than a question. But I'm also possessive and protective and probably going to drive you crazy with both. Fair warning. Noted. I smiled against his lips, feeling lighter than I had in months, despite the weight of everything he'd told me. Take me home? We drove back in comfortable silence, his hand finding mine across the console and staying there. When we reached my building, he walked me to the door like he always did, waiting while I fumbled with keys and trying not to think about how much I wanted to invite him up. But it was too soon, too much, too complicated. Thursday? He asked, hands in his pockets, looking almost uncertain in a way that made him seem younger. There's a charity gala my family sponsors. I have to make an appearance. I'd like you to come with me if you're comfortable with that. A gala. Like with fancy dresses and important people? Exactly like that. But I'll have a dress delivered to you. Don't argue, he added when I opened my mouth to protest. It's not charity. It's necessity. The event has a dress code I'm asking you to attend. That means I provide what's needed to make you comfortable there. I wanted to argue, wanted to insist I could handle my own wardrobe. But the reality was I didn't own anything appropriate for a charity gala, and buying something would eat up money I needed for rent. Okay, but nothing too expensive. And I'm only agreeing because you phrased it as necessity, not generosity. Deal. He kissed me once more, quick and possessive. Lock your doors. Text me when you're inside. I watched him walk back to his car, marveling at how quickly this had become normal. The bodyguards in the SUV that followed him everywhere, the constant phone calls and careful positioning, the casual mentions of violence and territory and business that operated outside legal boundaries. 2 weeks ago, I had been terrified of Tyler. Now I was falling for someone infinitely more dangerous, and the terrifying part was how right it felt. My phone buzzed before I even reached my apartment. Anthony. Home safe? Me. All 3 locks secured. Good night. Anthony. Dream well, Megan. I'll see you Thursday. I lay in bed that night thinking about his warning, about choosing this with full knowledge of consequences. But I also thought about the way he kissed me. The vulnerability in his eyes when he admitted being possessive and protective. The honest acknowledgement that his world was dangerous, but his feelings were real. Franco's warning echoed in my head. Everyone owes someone. Everything is transactions. But Anthony had been clear about costs and honest about risks. That felt like the opposite of Tyler's manipulation, the opposite of my father's abandonment. It felt like someone giving me power to make informed choices instead of trapping me in situations I didn't understand until too late. I fell asleep still tasting cedar and expensive cologne, still feeling the warmth of his hand in mine, still wondering where this path led but willing to keep walking it to find out. The parking lot behind Rossi's was darker than usual. 2 of the overhead lights had burned out weeks ago, and the landlord kept promising to fix them without ever following through. I walked out the employee exit at 11:13, exhausted from a Tuesday night shift that had somehow been busier than most weekends. My phone showed a text from Anthony sent 3 hours earlier. Dealing with business at the port, probably won't finish until late. Call if you need anything. I had typed back that I was fine, that I didn't need constant checking in. Now, standing in the poorly lit parking lot with my keys already gripped between my fingers the way women are taught for self-defense, I wished I had taken him up on the offer of a driver. The gray sedan sat 3 spaces from my car. 2 men inside, not even trying to hide their surveillance. The one in the passenger seat was looking directly at me, phone pressed to his ear. Not Tyler. These men were different. Professional. The kind of dangerous that came with training rather than obsession. Every survival instinct I had developed over 4 months of being stalked by Tyler screamed at me to move. I spun on my heel and went straight back inside, nearly running into Franco, who was counting the cash drawer at the bar. "Megan, what's wrong?" He looked up from the bills, concern immediate in his weathered face. "There's a car in the lot. 2 men watching." My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, scrolling for Anthony's number. They're not trying to hide it. Something's wrong. Franco's expression went from concern to grim. He moved to the window, peering through the blinds carefully. "Gray sedan. Virginia plates. Stay inside. Lock the back door." I was already calling Anthony. He picked up on the first ring, his voice sharp with alertness despite the late hour. "Megan, what happened?" "I'm still at Rossi's. There's a car in the parking lot with 2 men inside. They've been watching the building. Franco saw them too. He thinks something's wrong." The words tumbled out faster than I intended, fear making my voice thin. "Gray sedan? 2 men? One on a phone?" The background noise on his end suggested he was in a car, moving fast. "Yes. How did you know?" "Because they've been following my movements all week. I noticed them yesterday. Thought I had shaken them." I heard him speak to someone else in Italian, rapid commands that I couldn't follow. Then back to me. "Listen carefully. Stay inside with Franco. Lock both doors, front and back. I'm 40 minutes away at the port, but I'm sending Lucas Pellegrini and a security team. They'll be there in 10 minutes. Do not leave that building until Lucas arrives. Understand? Anthony." "Who are they?" "Rivals. Russians working for a man named Volkov. They saw us together. Think they can use you to get to me." Another exchange in Italian. Then the sound of an engine revving. 10 minutes, Megan. Lucas will take care of you until I get there. I promise." The call ended. I stood there holding my phone, trying to process what he had just said. Rivals. Russians. Use you to get to me. This was what Anthony had warned me about 2 weeks ago. The reality of being associated with someone in his world. People would watch me. Might try to use me as leverage. Franco was already on his own phone, speaking low Italian to someone. When he hung up, he locked the front door and turned off the exterior lights, leaving only the soft interior glow from behind the bar. "My cousin works for the Valentasi family. He's coming too. Should be here in 15 minutes. I'm sorry, Franco. I didn't mean to bring this to your restaurant." "Not your fault." He moved behind the bar, pulling out a baseball bat that he kept under the register. "Mr. Valentasi takes care of his people. You're his people now. That means you're protected, but it also means you're a target. You understand that, right?" I nodded, sinking onto a bar stool while my legs still worked. Through the window, I could see the sedan hadn't moved. The passenger was still on his phone, occasionally glancing toward the restaurant. What were they waiting for? Were they just surveillance or something worse? Time moved strangely. Each minute felt like 10, but also like seconds were slipping away too fast. I counted my breaths, tried to stay calm, checked my phone compulsively even though only 2 minutes had passed since Anthony's call. At minute 8, I heard the vehicles. Multiple engines, moving fast. 2 black SUVs pulled into the lot from opposite directions, boxing in the gray sedan smoothly. The doors opened simultaneously, and men emerged wearing dark suits and the kind of alertness that suggested military or law enforcement backgrounds. One of them approached the restaurant entrance, knocking precisely 3 times. Franco checked through the window, then unlocked the door. "Lucas Pellegrini?" "Yes." "Where's Megan Turner?" The man who entered was maybe 32, with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. He scanned the restaurant interior in seconds, cataloging exits and threats with practiced efficiency. "I'm Megan." I stood from the bar stool, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Lucas crossed the space between us in 3 strides, his expression serious, but not unkind. "Anthony sent me. You're safe now. The men in the sedan are leaving." He gestured toward the window where the gray car was indeed pulling out of the lot, heading away fast. My team encouraged them to find somewhere else to be tonight. "Who are they?" "Russian operatives. Low-level surveillance. Probably gathering information about your routines and connections to Anthony." Lucas pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. They're not the real threat. They're just the eyes. The threat is who they report to. Franco offered Lucas a glass of water, which he declined with a polite shake of his head. How long until Mr. Valentasi arrives? Lucas checked his watch. He was at the port when Megan called. That's about 40 minutes from here. He left immediately, so probably another 35 minutes. And those men won't come back. Not tonight. We made it clear that would be a terminal mistake. Lucas said it calmly, but the implication was unmistakable. Whatever his team had communicated to the Russians involved serious consequences. We waited. Lucas positioned himself near the window, occasionally speaking into his phone in low tones. 2 of his men stayed outside by the SUVs, constantly scanning the street. The remaining team members stood by the back entrance. The restaurant felt more like a fortress than a place that served pasta and wine. 37 minutes after my initial call, Anthony's Audi pulled up outside. He was out of the car before it fully stopped, striding toward the entrance with barely controlled urgency. Lucas opened the door for him. Anthony's eyes found me immediately, scanning me head to toe like he was checking for injuries. "You're okay?" "I'm fine." Scared, but fine. I stood, and he closed the distance between us in 2 steps, pulling me into an embrace that was more about reassurance than romance. I could feel his heart hammering against his chest, could feel the tension in every muscle. "Lucas, report." He didn't let go of me, just held me against him while he listened to his second in command. 2 men, gray Nissan sedan, Virginia plates. They matched the description of operatives we've been tracking all week, associated with Volkov's organization. When my team arrived, they attempted to leave. We intercepted them briefly to deliver a message, then let them go. "They won't return to this location." "What message?" I asked quietly. Lucas glanced at Anthony before answering. That Megan Turner is under the protection of the Valentasi family. That any attempt to surveil, approach, or threaten her would be met with immediate and overwhelming retaliation. Anthony finally released me, though he kept one hand on my shoulder. Volkov has been pushing boundaries for months. 3 weeks ago, we intercepted one of his shipments at the port. Cost him significant money and credibility. He's been looking for retaliation ever since, and he thinks I'm an easy target because you've been seen with me. Yes, Anthony's jaw clenched. This is my fault. I should have been more careful about being seen with you publicly. Should have anticipated that rivals would notice and try to exploit it. You warned me this would happen. 2 weeks ago, you told me people might try to use me as leverage. I touched his arm, making him look at me instead of Lucas. I chose to keep seeing you knowing that. This isn't your fault. It's absolutely my fault. The anguish in his voice surprised me. You're in danger because of me, because I was selfish enough to want you in my life despite knowing the risks. Lucas cleared his throat gently. Anthony, we should move. This location is compromised. The Russians know she works here, which means they know her patterns and vulnerabilities. Anthony nodded, already shifting back into command mode. Franco, thank you for keeping her safe. You'll be compensated for closing early tonight, and I'll have additional security posted outside the restaurant for the next few weeks, just as precaution. Not necessary, Mr. Valentasi. Just take care of her. Franco looked at me with genuine concern. Be safe, Megan. Come back when things calm down. Anthony turned back to me, his expression intense. I need you to come with me. Somewhere secure where Volkov's people can't reach you. Not your apartment. They likely know that location already. I have safe houses set up for exactly these situations. For how long? However long it takes to resolve this situation with Volkov. Could be a few days. Could be longer. He paused, and I could see him choosing his next words carefully. I'm not forcing you. I'm asking. Will you trust me enough to let me protect you while I handle this? This was the moment Franco had warned me about. The moment where Anthony's world stopped being theoretical danger and became immediate reality. I could refuse. Could go home to my apartment and hope the Russians wouldn't escalate beyond surveillance. Could pretend that being associated with Anthony Valentasi didn't make me a target. Or I could accept that I had chosen this path with full knowledge of where it led. Could trust the man who had eliminated Tyler from my life, who had been honest about risks and costs, who was now offering protection not as control, but as genuine care. I trust you. The words came out steadier than I expected. Where are we going? Relief flooded Anthony's features so completely it made him look younger. I have 2 locations. An apartment in the city, about 15 minutes from here. It's secure but designed for short-term situations. And a house outside the city, about 40 minutes away. More isolated, better security, more comfortable for extended stays. He watched my face as he explained the options. I recommend the house, and I'll stay with you. I'm not leaving you alone to deal with this. The house, then. I grabbed my purse from where I had set it by the bar. Do I have time to stop by my apartment for clothes? No, too risky. They might be watching your building. I'll have someone collect what you need tomorrow, or we can buy new things. Whatever you're comfortable with. Anthony's hand found the small of my back, guiding me toward the door. Lucas, take point. Radio ahead to the house. Make sure everything is ready. Already done. Carson and his team are en route to secure the perimeter. Lucas was already moving, phone to his ear, coordinating with military precision. The drive took exactly 40 minutes. Anthony drove while Lucas followed in one of the SUVs, creating a 2-vehicle convoy that felt simultaneously protected and surreal. We left the city behind, heading into areas where houses spread out across acres instead of being crammed together, where streetlights gave way to darkness interrupted only by occasional porch lights. Tell me about Volkov. I broke the silence after 20 minutes. If I'm running from him, I should understand who he is. Anthony's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Dmitry Volkov runs the Russian organization that controls most of the drug trafficking through the northern port. He's been in this city for about 5 years, aggressive about expanding territory. 3 weeks ago, his people tried to bring in a shipment through docks I control. My team intercepted it. Cost him roughly $3 million in product, and made him look weak to his own organization. So this is retaliation. This is him looking for leverage. He can't attack me directly without starting a war he'll lose. But if he has someone I care about, he thinks he can force me to give back territory, or money, or power. Anthony glanced at me briefly. Which is why you need to stay hidden until I make it clear that path is closed to him. How do you make that clear? By being willing to pay a higher price than he's willing to pay. By making sure he understands that touching you would cost him everything, while giving him an alternative path that saves face and preserves his position. He turned onto a private road, unmarked and barely visible. It's about finding the pressure points where he'll negotiate instead of escalate. The house appeared through the trees. Modern architecture with large windows and clean lines. Lights were already on inside, and I could see 2 men patrolling the perimeter with the kind of alert posture that suggested they were armed and ready. Anthony parked close to the entrance, coming around to open my door before I could do it myself. Welcome to the safest place in 100 miles. The security system is military grade. The perimeter is monitored by cameras and personnel. Nothing gets within 500 yards without us knowing about it. Inside was surprisingly comfortable. Not the fortress I had expected. Warm wood floors, furniture that looked lived in rather than sterile, a kitchen that actually seemed used. Anthony led me through a tour, showing me where everything was, how the security system worked, where the panic buttons were hidden if I needed help fast. Guest room is here. He opened a door to reveal a spacious bedroom with windows overlooking dark woods. My room is across the hall. You have complete privacy, but I'm close if you need anything. I stood in the doorway, taking it all in. 24 hours ago, I had been worried about making rent. Now I was hiding from Russian mobsters in a safe house with military-grade security. The whiplash of it all finally caught up with me, and I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Hey, Anthony's voice gentled, and then his arms were around me again, solid and warm. You're safe here. I promise you're safe. I know. I believe you. I pressed my face against his chest, breathing in cedar and the faint smell of gunpowder that suggested he had been handling weapons recently. I'm just overwhelmed. This is a lot. It is. And I'm sorry for dragging you into it. His hand stroked my hair. The gesture tender in ways I hadn't expected from someone capable of the violence he represented. But we'll handle it. Together. And when this is over, you'll go back to your life, and I'll make sure Volkov never looks in your direction again. I pulled back enough to see his face. What if I don't want to go back to my life exactly as it was? What if I want you in it? Something vulnerable crossed his expression, hope mixed with fear. Then we'll figure that out too. But first we survive this. Deal? Deal. I managed a weak smile. Do you have food here? I'm starving and exhausted and not sure which need to address first. Kitchen is fully stocked. Let me make you something while you get cleaned up. There should be clothes in the dresser that will fit well enough for tonight. He kissed my forehead gently. We're going to be okay, Megan. I'll make sure of it. Watching him walk toward the kitchen, seeing the way he moved even here with perfect vigilance, I realized that I believed him. This dangerous man who had entered my life 3 weeks ago had become the person I trusted most to keep me alive. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I was too tired to analyze it further. I took the offered shower, changed into borrowed clothes that were indeed close enough to my size, and emerged to find Anthony had made pasta from scratch. We ate mostly in silence, exhaustion and stress making conversation difficult. But his presence across the table from me, solid and protective, made the terror of the evening finally begin to recede. Get some sleep, he said when we finished. Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps. Tonight you just need to rest. I wanted to argue, wanted to stay up and discuss strategy, and understand exactly what resolving the situation with Volkov would cost. But my body had other ideas, practically dragging me toward the guest room. Anthony walked me to the door, waited while I turned on lights and checked that everything was secure. I'll be right across the hall, he reminded me. If you need anything, just knock or text. I'll have my phone on. Thank you for all of this, for keeping me safe. I touched his hand briefly, a connection that felt necessary. I know this is complicated and dangerous, and probably more trouble than I'm worth. You're worth it. He said it with such certainty that I almost believed him. Sleep well, Megan. Tomorrow we start fixing this. I closed the door and collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, too exhausted to change. My last thought before sleep claimed me was that somewhere out there, Russian mobsters were planning their next move. But inside these walls, with Anthony Valentasi standing guard, I felt safer than I had in months. Maybe safer than I had ever felt in my entire life. 3 days in isolation changed everything between us. The first morning I woke disoriented, forgetting briefly where I was until I saw the unfamiliar ceiling and heard Anthony's voice drifting from somewhere in the house, speaking Italian in that low, authoritative tone he used for business. I found him in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, making espresso with one hand while conducting what sounded like a negotiation with the other. When he saw me, his expression softened immediately. He ended the call within 30 seconds. Coffee? He held up the small cup, steam rising from dark liquid that smelled like it cost more per ounce than my usual grocery store brand. Please. I accepted it, wrapping both hands around the warmth. How long have you been awake? Since 5. Couldn't sleep. He started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, moving with surprising ease in the kitchen. I thought I'd make breakfast. Do you like omelets? Watching Anthony Valentasi crack eggs and chop vegetables with the same focused precision he probably applied to running criminal operations was surreal. His hands moved efficiently, no wasted motion. When I asked where he learned to cook, he smiled slightly. My grandmother. She insisted all her grandchildren know how to feed themselves properly. Said a man who couldn't cook was a man who'd starve or become dependent on others, and Valentasis don't do dependent. He whisked the eggs with quick strokes. Sophia loved cooking too. She wanted to open a restaurant someday. The mention of his sister hung in the air between us. Tell me about her, not how she died. Who she was when she was alive. He was quiet for a moment, concentrating on the pan. Then he started talking. And for the next hour while we cooked and ate together, Anthony shared memories that made Sophia real instead of just a tragedy. Her terrible singing voice. Her obsession with fashion magazines. The way she'd leave notes around the house for him when he came home late. Little reminders that someone cared whether he ate dinner or remembered to sleep. She would have liked you, he said finally, rinsing dishes in the sink. You have that same stubborn independence. That refusal to be saved or fixed by anyone. Is that why you're drawn to me? Because I remind you of her? No. He turned off the water, drying his hands deliberately. You remind me that good people exist outside my world, that not everything has to be about power and territory and violence. That's completely different. The second day, Lucas called with an update. 2 of Volkov's men had been captured trying to gather more intelligence about my routines. Anthony took the call in his office upstairs, but when he came back down, his jaw was tight with controlled anger. "What did you do to them?" I asked, because I needed to know, needed to understand exactly what protection from Anthony Valentasi meant in practice. "Nothing personally. Lucas is handling interrogation." He poured himself whiskey even though it was barely noon. "They'll tell us what Volkov's planning, what resources he has in play, where his vulnerabilities are. Then we'll use that information to negotiate." Negotiate. That's a kind word for whatever you're actually going to do. Yes, it is. He didn't apologize for the euphemism or try to soften the reality. "This is how my world works, Megan. I can protect you from seeing the details, but I can't pretend they don't exist." We spent that afternoon in strange companionship. Him working on his laptop while I curled up with a book I found on the shelf. Every so often I'd catch him watching me instead of his screen, expression unreadable. When I fell asleep on the couch, I woke to find a blanket tucked around me, and Anthony sitting in the chair across from me, still watching. "How long have I been out?" I stretched, disoriented. "About an hour. You looked peaceful." "I didn't want to wake you." He set aside his laptop. "Can I show you something?" He pulled up images on his phone. Architectural plans for a development project downtown. "My family has investments in several real estate ventures. This one needs design work, someone creative who understands how to maximize small spaces. Your sketches, the ones you showed me at dinner, they're exactly the kind of thinking this project needs." My throat tightened. "Anthony, I'm not qualified. I only finished 2 years of school. Talent doesn't require degrees. I could connect you with the project manager. No guarantees, but if your work is good, they'll use it. And they pay well. Enough that you could afford to go back to school if you wanted." He watched my face carefully. "This isn't charity. It's opportunity. What you do with it is entirely up to you." The third day, something shifted. We were arguing about what movie to watch. A silly domestic disagreement that somehow escalated into playful provocation. I pushed his shoulder lightly, making some joke about his taste in films. He caught my wrist, pulling me closer with that intensity that made my breath catch. "Megan." My name was a question and a warning. "Anthony." I met his gaze, saw desire and restraint warring in those dark eyes. "If we do this, I need you to be sure. Because once we cross this line, I'm not going back. I'm not good at casual. I'm not built for temporary." His hand slid to my waist, holding me close, but not trapping me. "Tell me you want this." I answered by kissing him, hard and desperate, and done with restraint. His control shattered. We barely made it to his bedroom before clothes started coming off. Urgency tempered by his surprising gentleness. He kept checking, kept asking if I was okay, giving me power even as he took what we both wanted. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets that smelled like him, Anthony traced patterns on my bare shoulder. "You're dangerous for me," he murmured. "People in my position can't afford weaknesses, can't afford to care too much about anything that can be taken away. I'm not a weakness. You're the biggest weakness I've ever had." He kissed my temple. "And I don't care. If caring about you makes me vulnerable, then I'll be vulnerable. That's how much you matter." The fourth morning, Lucas called early. Anthony took it in his office, was gone for almost an hour. When he came back, relief and exhaustion warred on his face. "It's done." Volkov agreed to terms. He sat heavily on the couch beside me. "You're officially off limits. Protected territory. Any move against you means immediate total war with my family, and Volkov can't afford that right now." "What did it cost you?" He told me everything. The territorial concessions, the lost revenue, about $300,000 annually. The 2 men eliminated during negotiations to prove he was serious. "That's too much," I whispered. "Anthony, I'm not worth that." He grabbed my face between his hands, forcing me to meet his eyes. "You're worth everything. Money I can recover, territory I can win back eventually. But you, Megan Turner, you're irreplaceable. Don't ever tell me you're not worth it." I kissed him then, tasting his certainty and desperation and love, because that's what this was. Complicated, dangerous, built on violence and territory disputes and moral compromises, but love nonetheless, raw and real and stronger than I'd ever expected to find. What happens now? I asked when we finally broke apart. Now we go back to our lives. You go back to work if you want. Back to your apartment if you want. I'll have security watching you discreetly, just as precaution. And we figure out what this means for us, for our future, without the immediate threat forcing decisions. He smiled slightly. Unless you'd prefer to stay here longer. I could get used to waking up with you. Take me home, I said, to my apartment. And then tomorrow you can take me to dinner like normal people. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Anthony kissed me one more time before standing. Normal people. I can try that. For you, I can try anything. We didn't go back to normal overnight. For a few days, we practiced ordinary things with deliberate care. Quiet dinners without looking over our shoulders, turning off our phones after midnight, sleeping without the lights on. Anthony asked what would make me feel safe that didn't involve more men or more guns, and then he actually did those things. Walked me through the building's exits, showed me the panic buttons once and never again. Learned my tells when anxiety crept in. Safety stopped being a performance and became a routine we kept together. 7 weeks later, my life looked completely different, but also strangely normal. I had moved into an apartment 2 floors below Anthony's penthouse in a building he owned downtown. Not living together exactly, but close enough that I could knock on his door at midnight when nightmares woke me. Close enough that he could stop by with coffee before I left for work. I still worked at Rossi's 3 nights a week, but now I also spent my days designing floor plans for a development project Anthony had connected me with. The project manager, a woman named Sarah, who didn't seem to care that I lacked a degree, had hired me after seeing my portfolio. The pay was more than I made in a month of waiting tables. Franco pulled me aside one evening during my shift. You look different, he said, studying my face with those perceptive eyes. Happier. More settled. I am. I wiped down the bar, comfortable in this space that had become familiar. Things are good. Mr. Valentasi is good to you? He is. I met his gaze directly. I know you warned me about his world, about transactions and owing people, but Anthony's been nothing but honest with me. About who he is, what he does, what being with him costs. Franco nodded slowly. My son is 14 now. Healthy. Plays soccer, drives me crazy with his attitude. He's alive because the Valentasi family helped when no one else would. That kind of debt, it never really goes away. But it also means something. Means they take care of their people. He squeezed my shoulder gently. You're his people now. That's worth something in this city. 2 days later, Lucas Pellegrini stopped by the restaurant with an update I had been waiting for. He sat at the bar during a slow afternoon, ordered coffee he didn't drink, and delivered his report with military precision. Tyler Grant is confirmed living in Seattle. He's employed at a car dealership dating someone new. Our monitoring shows no attempts to contact you, no searches for your information. He appears to have genuinely moved on. Lucas watched my face carefully. We'll maintain surveillance for another 3 months as precaution. But the threat seems neutralized. Relief washed through me so completely I had to grip the bar for support. Thank you. For checking. For making sure. Anthony's orders. He wanted you to have certainty. Lucas finished his coffee and left cash on the bar that was triple what the drink cost. Take care, Megan. You're good for him. He's different since you came into his life. Better. I met Gabriella Ricchetti at a charity event Anthony took me to. She was the daughter of an allied family. Someone who understood this world from birth. We ended up talking in a corner, while our respective men conducted business disguised as socializing. How do you handle it? I asked her quietly. Knowing what they do. What they're capable of. She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. You accept that the men we love are complicated. That they can be gentle with us and brutal with enemies. That morality in their world has different rules than the one we were raised in. She touched my arm lightly. But you also set boundaries. Make clear what you will and won't accept. Anthony respects boundaries. Not all of them do. There were difficult moments. The night Anthony came home at 3 a.m. with blood on his shirt that he said wasn't his. The overheard phone call where he ordered something in Italian that included words I recognized as violent, the constant presence of security, the way he never fully relaxed even in our supposedly safe spaces. We fought about it once, me demanding to know exactly what he had done, him refusing to give details because he didn't want those images in my head. The argument ended with both of us crying, me from frustration and fear, him from the weight of trying to protect me from himself. "I can't change what I am," he said, voice rough. "Can't undo 34 years of becoming this person. But I can promise I'll never lie to you about it. I'll never pretend to be something cleaner than I am. I don't need you to be clean," I whispered. "I need you to be honest. And I need to know that the violence has limits, that you're not just destroying people because you can." We wrote it down, not like a contract, but close. No lies about violence. No using me as leverage. No keeping me in the dark if a choice I made could put other people at risk. It wasn't romance the way movies sell it, but it was the only way this could work without either of us pretending to be someone we weren't. "I'm not." He pulled me close, burying his face in my hair. "Everything I do has purpose, protection, preservation, maintaining balance. I don't kill for pleasure. I don't hurt people who don't threaten what's mine. Does that make it better? I don't know. But it's the truth." 8 weeks in, Anthony took me to the rooftop of our building. He had set up dinner under string lights, the city spreading out below us in a carpet of illumination. Over wine and pasta he made himself. He talked about the future. "I want you in my life permanently," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "Not just dating, not just convenient. I want to build something real with you. I understand if you're not ready for that considering everything, but I need you to know my intentions. What would that look like?" My heart was racing. Building something real. Whatever we decide it looks like. You keeping your independence and your work. Me supporting your dreams without trying to control them. Both of us accepting what the other is, complications and all. He traced circles on my palm with his thumb. "I'm not asking you to marry me today. I'm asking if you can see yourself wanting that eventually. With me." Despite everything, I thought about Tyler. About the 4 months of terror that Anthony had ended in 7 minutes. About the honest way he discussed violence instead of hiding it. About how he talked about Sophia with love and grief and guilt. About the way he supported my architecture dreams without trying to take credit for my success. "Yes," I said. "I can see that. Eventually. When we're both ready." Relief and joy crossed his face in equal measure. "Then that's what we'll work toward." He told me then about the shelters, how he had started funding organizations that helped women escape abusive relationships, that provided safe housing and legal assistance and resources. How he did it anonymously because he didn't want credit, just wanted to honor Sophia's memory by protecting people the way he hadn't protected her. "You're making something good from something terrible," I said, tears in my eyes. "That's not nothing, Anthony. That matters. It matters because you made me see it mattered." He kissed my knuckles gently. "Before you, I just wanted revenge. After you, I want redemption. Those aren't the same thing." Life settled into new rhythms after that night. I worked on my architecture projects, occasionally picked up shifts at Rossi's because I liked the work and the people. Anthony ran his empire with slightly less ruthlessness, more calculation about necessary versus unnecessary violence. We had dinners with Lucas and Gabriella, learned to navigate social events where half the attendees were criminals. I kept checking on my mother, too. Rides to follow up appointments, groceries stocked, bills tracked in the same spreadsheet I used for floor plan drafts. Loving Anthony didn't erase where I came from. It only made me more stubborn about not losing the parts of my life that weren't his to manage. Franco told me one afternoon that he saw how we looked at each other, that it reminded him of how he and his wife had been when they were young. "Hold on to that," he advised. "Life in this world is complicated. Love makes it bearable." Tyler never called, never texted, never appeared in my nightmares anymore. That chapter closed completely, replaced by something infinitely more complex, but also infinitely more real. I stood on our building's rooftop one evening, watching the sun set over the city, and realized I was happy, not despite the complications or the danger or the moral compromises, just happy. Anthony found me there, wrapping his arms around me from behind, chin resting on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How 3 months ago I was terrified of my ex-boyfriend. Now I'm in love with a mafia boss. Life is strange. Strange but good. Strange but very good." I turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you for handling Tyler permanently, for being honest about your world, for loving me despite it being dangerous for both of us. Thank you for choosing this anyway." He kissed me softly, for seeing who I am underneath everything and deciding it was worth the risk. We stood there as darkness fell and city lights bloomed below. Two people from completely different worlds who had found something real in the space between danger and safety, violence and gentleness, fear and love. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was honest and complicated and built on full knowledge of what we were choosing. And that made it worth everything.